So this is going to be more of a rant with regards to boto3, which is the AWS SDK for Python that provides a fairly simple integration with AWS via API. Our entry point is of course the Python package index, which contains the documentation on how to install this module called boto3. Of course, we can use a virtual environment. And last but not least, one important aspect is that we need to have an identity access management user with the correct policies in place with regards to the service that we will interact with. Concretely, we're going to need an access key and a secret access key. And in the documentation, we have a straightforward, simple example with regards to interaction with S3 storage service. But before we start, we're going to, of course, start the interpreter. I would like to double check that we have the environment variables in place, more exactly, as I said, AWS access key, and of course the secret is there as well. And according to the documentation, we need to create an S3 object using the resource method. So let's import our module, right, boto3, and let's create our object. And the next step is to list our buckets according to the example. So if we do an iteration for bucket in S3 buckets all, we can print all our buckets. I only have one bucket called tech takeovers, which is correctly displayed. Now, an interesting thing is looking at the S3 object. So if we do a dir on the S3 object, we can see that we have the bucket method. So let's dig a little bit deeper and take a look at the docstring for bucket, and we can see that bucket actually creates a resource, mainly an object, right? So it's not creating the real bucket. If we're doing a simple example and take a look once more for this created object at the methods, we can see that it has a create method behind the scenes. And if we are cheeky enough and do the same thing, so for create, take a look at the docstring for this method, right? We're going to see it's going to be a lengthy one, honestly, but in the header in the beginning we can see that actually this is the method that will create our bucket. So the documentation, we have some warnings with regards to some deprecated things. Creates an S3 bucket. Of course, you need to have an access key to authenticate request, but this is the method that actually creates the bucket, right? This is fine and dandy, pretty simple, we understood. But now we have another documentation, the official AWS Boto documentation, with some examples with regards to the same service, in which we have the same approach, meaning retrieving the list of existing buckets. Now let's delete the S3 object that we created and create a new one using the client method. And now an interesting thing, if we like to list the buckets, so we can create, I don't know, response object S3 list buckets. Now if we take a look at what type of object is our response, it's actually a dictionary. Even more, if we would like to take a look at the buckets, we have the buckets key, right? So if we do get buckets, we'll have the same information, meaning one bucket created in our account. Now this begs the question, we have two ways of interacting with AWS. Why is that? I would say from my perspective the answer is simple. If you'd like a more, let's say, low-level approach and play with the raw dictionaries with regards to AWS API mapping of that service, you can go for the client side of things, right? But if you like to have a more programmatically approach, a more object-oriented approach, go for resource side of things, in which you're going to create bucket as objects and then play with those objects in order to create actual buckets in your AWS account. So we have two ways. That's the gist of it. Thank you very much.